Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good, from science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Bufnagle, the podcast, where we talk about all good things in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Rafe, and you've been on the edge of your seats for a week. I understand that. That kind of happens. If you want, you can pull out the book and find out what happens. But I know that, as the story goes, this is a great story. But I know that you guys are hanging around for this week, and you're excited to be here because you are the world's greatest listeners. You have made us a global top 10% podcast. As usual, reach us at bufnagle@bufnagle.com. Remember, share the love, share the buff. Give us a 5-star review and hit like and smiley stars and subscribe and all those things. Tell a friend to listen. You get a free episode. And in the show notes, there's a link where you can buy me a coffee if you'd like. Hey, when we left off last week, there was we were tense. We were reading the Book of Esther, and Esther and Mordecai are in a dire situation. The king has been convinced to sign a decree of destruction of the bad guys. All right, and let's wipe out the Jews. Right. So he says, what we're going to do is we're going to go do that on the 13th or the 14th, depending on if you get it from the Greek or the Hebrew piece. Of the last day of the month, Adar, we're going to wipe them all out. And Mordecai finds this out. He tells Esther, and Esther's like, holy cow, we're going to do something about this. So Esther says, I'm going to go talk to the king. This is my role. This is what I've been called to do. And you were put here for a reason is the lesson that comes out of all of this story here. And the way Mordecai puts it, he says, perhaps it was for a time like this that you became queen. And, Esther's queen, I want to talk a little bit about this here before we get back to the story. Esther's queen, and you may look at that and you say, well, yeah, I mean, I'm just, I'm just a guy doing a podcast, or I'm just a dad, or I'm just, somebody's Aunt Jane, or you are who you are. You're saying, well, I'm not the queen. I don't have that kind of power. I don't have that authority to do something grand, like saving a whole nation from impending slaughter. And the answer is, well, yeah, you're right. So what? Right? The history of the world is people who have made a difference, even despite their station. So you're called to do what you're called to do, which is what you know is right. And sometimes that's really hard. For Esther here, she is preparing with 3 full days of fasting from food and water. She, in the last story, the last part, we read that she covered herself in, what did she say? She covered her head in dung and ashes, afflicted her body severely, and in place of her festive ornaments, her tangled hair covered her. So she's like going the whole sackcloth and ashes thing for her in her sense to prepare for this thing. And it's all about humility and begging to be, please don't, there's justice and mercy. We would really love some mercy, because please don't give me justice because I don't deserve. I mean, I deserve what you're planning to give to me, and I would like to not have that. I would like some mercy instead. And so Esther's getting ready to go see the king to beg and plead for mercy from the king about this thing. All right. And remember, so you got the king, and you got Haman, who is the second command kind of to the king. Mordecai and Esther are the big players here. Here we go. Chapter D, the Greek one. This is a Greek reading. And as Esther goes to Ahasuerus. On the 3rd day, ending her prayers, she took off her prayer garments and arrayed herself in her splendid attire. In making her appearance, after invoking the all-seeing God and Savior, she took with her 2 maids. On the one, she leaned gently for support. while the other followed her, bearing her train. She glowed with perfect beauty, and her face was as joyous as it was lovely, though her heart was pounding with fear. She passed through all the portals till she stood before the king, who was seated on his throne, clothed in full robes of state and covered with gold and precious stones, so that he inspired great awe. Now, remember from the first piece, she is not allowed by law. If she is not summoned to go see the king, she cannot go see the king under penalty of death. And so she's taking a risk here that if she goes in to see the king and she goes to plead this, not only does she have to convince him, she has to convince him that it's okay for her to actually come to see him. Will you hear my case? You can't even ask if your case will be heard. So this is a real risk she's taking here. And she puts her, she makes herself up look as good as she can look. And she gets all the way through into the inner room. And she confronts him there. And she's there looking all wonderful and perfect. And he's looking all wonderful and perfect. And he fills people with great awe. As he looked up in extreme anger, his features fiery and majestic, the queen staggered, turned pale, and fainted, collapsed against the maid in front of her. But God changed the king's anger to gentleness. In great anxiety, he sprang from his throne, held her in his arms until she recovered, and confronted her with reassuring words. "What is it, Esther?" he said to her. "I am your brother. Take courage. You shall not die. This order of ours applies only to our subjects. Come near." Raising the golden scepter, he touched her neck with it, embraced her, and said, "Speak to me." All right, so remember, if he doesn't extend the golden scepter to you, you will be killed for approaching the king. So she's off the hook now because he has said, "You'll be okay. This order only applies to our subjects." So it's like, all your people will be dead, but you'll be all right because you'll be with me, right? Okay, yeah, that's what she said. She replied, "I saw you, my lord, as an angel of God, and my heart was shaken by fear of your majesty. For you are awesome, my lord, though your countenance is full of mercy." And she said this. As she said this, she fainted. The king was shaken, and all his attendants tried to revive her. On to chapter 5, which is kind of a summary of this. This is the chapter 5, so this is back to the Hebrew piece here. Now, on the third day, Esther put on her royal garments, stood in the inner courtyard, looking toward the royal palace, while the king was seated in his royal throne with his audience in his audience chamber facing the palace doorway. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the courtyard, she won his favor, and he extended toward her the golden scepter he held. She came up to him and touched the top of the scepter. Then the king said to her, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even if it is half my kingdom, it shall be granted to you." Esther replied, "If it please your majesty, come today with Haman to a banquet I have prepared." The king ordered, "Have Haman make haste to fulfill the wish of Esther." Okay, so she didn't just come and ask, "Can you please not slaughter everybody I know? Okay, the whole nation of the Jews. Please don't do that." She didn't do that. She came to him and she said, "If it please your majesty, come today with Haman to a banquet I've prepared." So she's having a banquet for the king and for Haman. Okay, so those top two people in the government, she's going to have them come on over for dinner. So she's going to have, okay? And the king says, "Have Haman make haste to fulfill the wish of Esther." Okay, so step 1, she's now got him going in the right direction. Part 5, Haman's downfall, the first banquet of Esther. So the king went with Haman to the banquet Esther had prepared. And during the drinking of the wine, the king said to Esther, "Whatever you ask for shall be granted, and whatever request you make shall be honored, even if it is for half my kingdom." And Esther replied, "This is my petition and my request. If I have found favor with my king, and if it pleases your majesty to grant my petition and honor my request, let the king come with Haman tomorrow to a banquet I will prepare, and tomorrow I will do as the king asks." So this first banquet is to get them to come to a second banquet, which I think is kind of an interesting thing. But they went to the first banquet. He says, "I'll give you whatever you need." He said, "Well, if that's okay, I would like to really ask you to come to another banquet tomorrow." Haman's plot against Mordecai. That day, Haman left happy and in good spirits. But when he saw that Mordecai at the royal gate did not rise and showed no fear of him, he was filled with anger toward him. Haman restrained himself, however, and went home, where he summoned his friends and his wife Zeresh. He recounted the greatness of his riches, the large number of his sons, and how the king had promoted him and placed him above all the officials and royal servants. Moreover, Haman added, Queen Esther invited no one but me to come with the kings to the banquet she prepared. Again tomorrow, I am going to be her guest with the king. Okay, so he's all excited. He said, "Look how great I am! I got all this money. I'm very powerful. I have all these sons, and I get to go hang out with the king tomorrow. This is great. Look how awesome I am." Yet none of this satisfies me as long as I continue to see the Jew Mordecai sitting at the royal gate. Remember, he would not bow to Mordecai would not bow to Haman because he bows to no one but God. His wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, "Have a stake set up, 50 cubits in height, and in the morning ask the king to have Mordecai impaled on the stake. Then go to the banquet with the king in good spirits." This pleased Haman, and he had the stake erected. So all right, no problem. Hey, great idea, guys. So we're gonna, because he's second in command, he has all sorts of power. He's going to have Mordecai impaled on a stake. That was kind of a thing that, that kind of happened back then. They would make a big stake and stick you on it, and eventually you just die on the stake. Okay, 50 cubits high. Okay, a cubit is like a foot and a half. I mean, it's like 75 feet tall. This is a very large stake, and if it's a big deal, you're going to make it a big stake. Chapter 6, Mordecai's reward from the king. That night the king, unable to sleep, asked that the chronicle of notable events be brought in. While this was being read to him, the passage occurred in which Mordecai reported Bigthan and Teresh, two of the royal eunuchs who guarded the entrance, for seeking to assassinate the king. The king asked, "What was done to honor and exalt Mordecai for this?" The king's attendants replied, "Nothing was done for him." "Who is in the court?" the king asked. Now Haman had entered the outer court of the king's palace to suggest to the king that Mordecai should be impaled on the stake he had just raised for him. The king's attendants answered the king, "Haman is waiting in the court." The king said, "Let him come in." And when Haman entered, the king said to him, "What should be done for a man whom the king wishes to reward?" Now Haman thought to himself, "Whom would the king wish to honor more than me?" So he replied to the king, "For the man whom the king wishes to honor, there should be brought the royal robe the king wore, and the horse the king rode with the royal crest placed on its head. The robe and the horse should be given to one of the noblest of the king's officials, who must clothe the man the king wishes to reward, and have him ride on the horse in the public square of the city, and cry out before him, 'This is what is done for the man whom the king wishes to honor.'" Now, so keep in mind, the king says, I want to honor somebody for doing a great thing for me. What should I do? And Haman thinks, well, he wants to honor me, so that's great. So he thinks it's this great idea that I should be paraded around the city and make somebody say how great I am. All right. Now, the king is talking about Mordecai, but Haman thinks the king is talking about Haman. Then the king said to Haman, "Hurry, take the robe and the horse as you have proposed, and do this for the Jew Mordecai, who is sitting at the royal gate. Do not omit anything you proposed." So Haman took the robe and the horse, clothed Mordecai, and had him ride in the public square of the city, and cried out before him, "This is what is done for the man whom the king wishes to honor." Okay, so this really cracked me up when I read it, because poor Haman now has just been completely had. He's going into the king to talk about how can we get Mordecai killed, and meanwhile the king wants to honor him, and now Haman, instead of getting to kill Mordecai, has to parade him around the city and talk about how great he is. Right? It always goes this way, guys. This is hubris. Okay, don't be Haman. All right. Mordecai then returned to the royal gate, while Haman hurried home grieving with his head covered. When he told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened to him, his advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "If Mordecai, before whom you are beginning to fall, is of Jewish ancestry, you will not prevail against him, but will surely be defeated by him." Esther's second banquet. While they were speaking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman off to the banquet Esther had prepared. Chapter 7. So the king and Haman went to the banquet with Queen Esther. Again, on the second day, as they were drinking wine, the king said to Esther, "Whatever you ask, Queen Esther, shall be granted you. Whatever request you make, even for half the kingdom, shall be honored." Queen Esther replied, "If I have found favor with you, O king, and if it pleases your majesty, I ask that my life be spared, and I beg that you spare the lives of my people. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we were only to be sold into slavery, I would remain silent, for then our distress would not have been worth troubling the king." King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther, "Who and where is the man who dared to do this?" Esther replied, "The enemy oppressing us is this wicked Haman." And at this, Haman was seized with dread of the king and the queen. The king left the banquet in anger and went into the garden of the palace. But Haman stayed to beg Queen Esther for his life, since he saw that the king had decided on his doom. When the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman had thrown himself on the couch on which Esther was reclining, and the king exclaimed, "Will he also violate the queen while she is with me in my own house?" Scarcely had the king spoken when the face of Haman was covered over. So the king goes out because he's just, I can't believe Haman had done this terrible thing. He goes to, Haman stays back to beg with Esther. She's sitting on the couch. He's on top of her. Like, it's not obvious to me what he's doing. He's violating her in some sense. And I don't know if he's just trying to I don't know what he's trying to do to her, really. It's not obvious, but the king sees that he's doing something bad to his queen, and at this point, it's going to be bad for Haman. Harbona, one of the eunuchs who attended the king, said, "At the house of Haman stands a stake 50 cubits high. Haman made it for Mordecai, who gave the report that benefited the king." The king then answered, "Impale him on it." So they impaled Haman on the stake he had set up for Mordecai, and the anger of the king abated. That is a very, very quick turnaround. That's a Shakespearean turnaround in for poor Haman, who let just you meet these characters. Don't be Haman. Do not be Haman. Chapter 8. That day, King Ahasuerus gave the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, to Queen Esther. And Mordecai was admitted to the king's presence, for Esther had revealed his relationship to her. The king removed his signet ring that he had taken away from Haman and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther put Mordecai in charge of the house of Haman. Wow, what a turn of events. Section 6. The Jewish Victory and the Feast of Purim. The second royal decree. Esther again spoke to the king. She fell at his feet and tearfully implored him to revoke the harm done by Haman the Agagite and the plan he had devised against the Jews. The king stretched forth the golden scepter to Esther. So she rose and, standing before him, said, "If it seems good to the king, and if I have found favor with him, if the thing seems right to the king, and I am pleasing to the eyes, let a document be issued to revoke the letters that the schemer Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, wrote for the destruction of the Jews in all royal provinces. For how can I witness the evil that is to befall my people, and how can I behold the destruction of my kindred?" The king then said to Queen Esther and to the Jew Mordecai, "Now that I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have impaled him on the stake because he was going to attack the Jews, you in turn may write in the king's name what you see fit concerning the Jews, and seal the letter with the royal signet ring. For a decree written in the name of the king and sealed with the royal signet ring cannot be revoked." So, man, it's really turned now. All right, so now Mordecai and Esther get to write the, what are we going to do with the Jews thing? And, they could say, don't kill all the Jews on the 13th or 14th, or whatever the day is of the thing that's coming. At that time, on the 23rd day of the third month, Sivan, the royal scribes were summoned. Exactly as Mordecai dictated, they wrote to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and officials of the 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia, to each province in its own script, and to each people in its own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. These letters, which he wrote in the name of the king and sealed with the royal signet ring, he sent by mounted couriers riding thoroughbred royal steeds. And in these letters, the king authorized the Jews in each and every city to gather and defend their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate every armed group of any nation or province that might attack them, along with their wives and children, and to seize their goods as spoil on the single day throughout the province of the king, the 13th day of the 12th month of Adar. So he's saying, if they're coming after you, you have the right to defend yourselves against them and to seize their goods as spoils. So they have the right to not only get rid of the people that are coming to take them out, but actually to go after them and take their stuff. So chapter E, this is a copy of the letter. The great king Ahasuerus, to the governors of the provinces in the 127 satraps from India to Ethiopia, and to those who are loyal to our government, greetings. Many have become more ambitious the more they were showered with honors throughout the bountiful generosity of their patrons. Not only do they seek to do harm to our subjects, but incapable of dealing with such greatness, they even begin plotting against their own benefactors. Not only do they drive out gratitude from among humankind, but with the arrogant boastfulness of those to whom goodness has no meaning, they suppose that they will escape stern judgment of the all-seeing God. Often, too, the fair speech of friends entrusted with the administration of affairs has induced many placed in authority to become accomplices in the shedding of innocent blood, and has involved them in irreparable calamities by deceiving with malicious slander the sincere goodwill of the rulers. This can be verified in ancient stories that have been handed down to us, but more fully when you consider the wicked deeds perpetrated in the midst of pestilential influence of those undeserving of authority. We must provide for the future so as to render the kingdom undisturbed and peaceful for all people, taking advantage of changing conditions and always deciding matters coming to our attention with equitable treatment. For instance, Haman, son of Hammedatha, a Macedonian, certainly not of Persian blood, was very different from us in generosity, was hospitably received by us. He benefited so much from the goodwill that we have toward all people that he was proclaimed our father, before whom everyone was to bow down, and he attained the position second only to the royal throne. But unable to control his arrogance, he strove to deprive us of kingdom and of life, and by weaving intricate webs of deceit, he demanded the destruction of Mordecai, our savior and constant benefactor, and of Esther, our blameless royal consort, together with their whole nation. For by such measures he hoped to catch us defenseless and to transfer the rule of the Persians to the Macedonians. But we find that the Jews, who were doomed to extinction by this arch criminal, are not evildoers, but rather governed by very just laws, and are the children of the Most High, the living God of majesty, who has maintained the kingdom in a flourishing condition for us and for our forebears. You will do well, then, to ignore the letter sent by Haman, son of Hammedatha, for he who composed it has been impaled, together with his entire household, before the gates of Susa. Thus swiftly has God, who governs all, brought just punishment upon him. You shall exhibit a copy of this letter publicly in every place to certify that the Jews may follow their own laws, and that you may help them on the day set forth for their ruin, the 13th day of the 12th month, Adar, to defend themselves against those who attack them. For God, ruler of all, has turned that day from one of destruction of the chosen people into one of joy for them. Therefore, you too must celebrate this memorial day amongst your designated feast with all the rejoicing, so that both now and in the future it may be a celebration of deliverance for us and for the Persians of goodwill, but for those who plot against us, a reminder of destruction. Every city and province, without exception, that does not observe this decree shall be ruthlessly destroyed with fire and sword, so that it will be left not merely untrodden by people, but even shunned by wild beasts and birds forever. And that's chapter E. Back to chapter 8, which is kind of a little summary of that. A copy of the letter to be promulgated as law in each and every province was published amongst all the people, so that the Jews might be prepared on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. Couriers mounted on royal steeds sped forth in haste at the king's order, and the decree was promulgated in the royal precinct of Susa. Mordecai left the king's presence clothed in a royal robe of violet and of white cotton, with a large crown of gold and a mantle of fine crimson linen. The city of Susa shouted with joy, and for the Jews there was splendor and gladness, joy and triumph. In each and every province and in each and every city, wherever the king's order arrived, there was merriment and joy, banqueting and feasting for the Jews. And many of the people of the land identified themselves as Jews, for fear of the Jews fell upon them. Chapter 9. The Massacre Reversed. When the day arrived on which the order decreed by the king was to be carried out, the 13th day of the 12th month, Adar, on which the enemies of the Jews had expected to overpower him, the situation was reversed. The Jews overpowered those who hated them. The Jews mustered in their cities throughout the provinces of King Ahasuerus to attack those who sought to do them harm, and no one could withstand them, for fear of them fell upon all people. Moreover, all the officials of the provinces, the satraps, governors, and royal procurators supported the Jews out of fear of Mordecai, for Mordecai was powerful in the royal palace, and the report was spreading through all the provinces that he was continually growing in power. The Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them. They did to those who hated them as they pleased. In the royal precinct of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 people. They also killed Parshandatha, Delphon, Aspatha, Poratha, Adalia, Aridatha, Paramashta, Arisha, Arida, and Vezantha, the 10 sons of Haman, son of Hamadatha, the foe of the Jews. However, they did not engage in plundering. Now, it's interesting that there's a list of these things that they were killed there on that day, but the Greek version in chapter E that we just read says that the sons had been, or that Haman had been impaled along with all his sons. So there's a little confusion there about how they actually met their doom. But the whole house of Haman went down. It was not a good day for the whole family, right? So don't be Haman. That's still the lesson, right? On the same day, when the number of those killed in the royal precinct of Susa was reported to the king, he said to Queen Esther, "In the royal precinct of Susa, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 people, as well as the 10 sons of Haman. What must they have done in other royal provinces? You shall again be granted whatever you ask, and whatever you request shall be honored." So Esther said, "If it pleases your majesty, let the Jews in Susa be permitted again tomorrow to act according to today's decree, and let the 10 sons of Haman be impaled on stakes." The king then gave an order that this be done, and the decree was published. So the 10 sons of Haman were impaled, and the Jews in Susa mustered again on the 14th of the month of Adar and killed 300 people in Susa. However, they did not engage in plundering. The other Jews who dwelt in the royal provinces also mustered and defended themselves and obtained rest from their enemies. They killed 75,000 of those who hated them, but they did not engage in plunder. This happened on the 13th day of the month of Adar. So in Susa, they got an extra day, bonus day of revenge, and elsewhere so a lot of people who were trying to knock out the Jews got knocked out themselves, and that was there's the lesson, right? The Feast of Purim. On the 14th day of the month, they rested and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. The Jews in Susa, however, mustered on the 13th and 14th of the month, but on the 15th they rested and made it a day of joyful banqueting. That is why the rural Jews who dwell in the villages celebrate the 14th of the month of Adar as a day of joyful banqueting, a holiday in which they send food to one another. Mordecai recorded all these events and sent letters to all the Jews, both near and far, in all the provinces of the king. He ordered them to celebrate every year both the 14th and the 15th of the month of Adar, as the days on which the Jews obtained rest from their enemies, and as the month which was turned from them from sorrow into joy, from mourning into celebration. They were to observe these days with joyful banqueting, sending food to one another and gifts to the poor. The Jews adopted as a custom what they had begun doing and what Mordecai had written to them. Section 7. Epilogue. The Rise of Mordecai. Summary of the story. Haman, son of Hamadatha, the Agagite, the foe of all the Jews, had planned to destroy them and had cast the pur, or lot, for the time of their destruction. And yet, when the plot became known to the king ordered in writing that the wicked plan Haman had devised against the Jews should instead be turned against Haman, and that he and his sons should be impaled on stakes. And so these days have been named Purim after the word pur. We talked about that earlier in the last episode. Thus, because of all that was contained in this letter, and because of what they had witnessed and experienced in this event, the Jews established and adopted a custom for themselves, their descendants, and all who should join them, the perpetual obligation of celebrating these 2 days every year in the manner prescribed by this letter, and at the time appointed. These days were to be commemorated and kept in every generation, by every clan, in every province, and in every city. These days of Purim were never to be neglected among the Jews, nor forgotten by their descendants. Esther and Mordecai act in concert. Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote to confirm with full authority this second letter about Purim, and Mordecai sent documents concerning peace and security to all the Jews in the 127 provinces of Ahasuerus' kingdom. Thus were established and appointed for this time these days of Purim, in which Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had designated for the Jews, just as they had previously enjoyed upon themselves and upon their descendants the duty of fasting and supplication. The command of Esther confirmed in their prescriptions for Purim and was recorded in the book. Chapter 10. The rise of Mordecai completed. King Ahasuerus levied a tax on the land and on the islands of the sea. All the acts of his power and valor, as well as a detailed account of the greatness of Mordecai, whom the king promoted, are recorded in the chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia. The Jew Mordecai was next in rank to the king in high standing among the Jews, popular with many of his kindred, seeking the good of his people and speaking out on behalf of the welfare of all of its descendants. Chapter F. Mordecai's dream fulfilled. Then Mordecai said, "This is the work of God. I recall the dream I had about these very things, and not a single detail has been left unfulfilled. The tiny spring that grew into the river, and there was light and sun and many waters. The river is Esther, whom the king married and made queen. The 2 dragons are myself and Haman. The nations are those who assembled to destroy the name of the Jews, but my people is Israel, who cried to God and was saved. The Lord saved his people and delivered us from all these evils. God worked signs and great wonders, such as have not occurred among the nations. For this purpose, he arranged 2 lots, one for the people of God and the second for all other nations. These 2 lots were fulfilled in the hour, the time, and the day of judgment before God and among all nations. God remembered his people and rendered justice to his inheritance. Gathering together with joy and happiness before God, they shall celebrate these days on the 14th and 15th of the month Adar, throughout all future generations of his people Israel. Colophon. In the 4th year of the reign of Ptolemy and Cleopatra, Dusithius, who said he was a priest and Levite, and his son Ptolemy, brought the present letter of Purim, saying that it was genuine, and that Lysimachus, son of Ptolemy of the community of Jerusalem, had translated it. The end. All right, that's the story of Esther. All right, it is a... okay, so how do we summarize this? Okay, there's a lot of things going on here. The Book of Esther has its, I'm going to call it, its initial pieces written in Hebrew. In the 1st century BC, some pieces were added in Greek that fill out the story. The version I read kind of goes in order, although not all Bibles you have that even include the Greek pieces go in that order. They may just be tacked at the end. The pieces that are written in Hebrew contain no mention of God. The closest thing they come is the statement that Mordecai makes to Esther, that he says there may be divine. The Jews will be saved from another source. Right? That's the closest he comes to talking of God. There is lots of religious-y stuff in there. There's sackcloth and ashes. There is people being humble and practicing religious kinds of things, like not bowing in front of men when you only bow in front of God. But it's the Greek pieces that were added in the 1st century BC that add those components. Now, if you don't like them, then you can take those out if you like. Doesn't matter to me. It's your Bible. You read it the way you want to do it. All right. But but it's a great story. It is. I think it's Shakespearean in the quickness of the downfall of Haman. He goes in one day. He's ready to have Mordecai killed, and by the end of that day, he's the one who's been executed on the spike he set up for Mordecai, and Mordecai takes his seat. Okay, that's a classic tale. Right? Hubris will always get you, and if you get too big for your britches and start, he got the king. He got the king to let him write his own law, and the king said, "Here, take my ring, and you can pass it off in my name because I got other things to do. I got to go to the ball game and throw out the first pitch or whatever it is. I have to do other things." And Haman took that, and he went farther than he should have, and he ran up against Esther and Mordecai, and they were sneaky enough to get past him. The big lesson, though, is you are here for a reason, and that is the one that Mordecai convinces Esther of. Perhaps it was for a time like this that you became queen. Perhaps it is a time like right now that you are here right now. You are here. Like, God could have put you anywhere in the chronicle of time, and he put you here now, and you're listening to me now. I mean, there's a reason you are here, and you need to find out what that is. Don't be afraid of that, right? But also don't go into it blindly without preparation. Esther goes in with preparation. She and her whole household fast. She asks all her friends to fast. Her servants all fast, and she prepares herself with. She takes off her splendid garments, puts on garments of distress and mourning. In place of her precious ornaments, she covered her head with dung and ashes. She afflicted her body severely, and in places of her festive ornaments, her tangled hair covered her. She atones. She works to get herself back. Sin is not a thing; it's a state. Okay, you can sin, which is a verb. You can do a sin, which is a noun, and then there's the state of sin, which is a turning away. When you turn away from God, bad things happen, and when you turn back, that's how you get reconciliation. And this is a story about reconciliation. It's about God protecting His people, and it's about you stepping up to the job that you're called to do, whether it's risky or not. And people of old understood this. I don't know if we understand it now. It's easy to complain. It's a lot harder to do the work. But to quote Mordecai, perhaps it was for a time like this that you became queen. So in the meantime, everybody, remember to seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish, and enjoy the adventure of life.
It's going to be a great day.